Thank you, Dr. Jayaprakash, for nicely, one-man debate. So you spoke in favor and against to one-man debate, and you nicely presented that. So I invite you, two other speakers also, Dr. Ajay Kumar and Dr. Sheikh, for question and answer sessions.
Hello.
So I would like to begin with Dr. Sheikh with you. So very
Sure.
basic
Yes.
question. Suppose a patient comes to you in your clinic and already on metformin. Now you add, yeah, thank you, Dr. Murthy, for being with us again, because you are the main coordinator.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. The basic question is, because if we have to add one more medicine, or should we escalate the dose of existing medication? You understand? In other way around, is combination better than monotherapy? Or to make it more clear, highest dose of monotherapy or sub mini or sub threshold dose of two drugs? This is the question. So, what's your opinion on that
Yeah.
point? Let
Sure.
me
It's a
give an
very good
example.
question, sir. I think
Yeah, let
it's
me
a very good
clarify
question, sir.
something.
I think. Hello.
Yeah. I will tell you one more point. Somebody is already on
Okay.
15
Yes.
milligram pioglitazone. Should we increase to 30 or 45 milligram, or should we add another medicine if the patient not on the target? So this type of situation is very common in clinical practice. So I want your opinion on that point.
Sure. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. It's a very nice question, very, very clinically oriented. So I think what we've been telling to all our patients that it is the target of HbA1c and the target of prevention of complications. That is what we are looking in the long term. So without causing hypoglycemia, without causing a weight gain, and giving a good quality of life, maybe use two or three drugs in combination, not full doses, but start with the minimal tolerated doses of the drug to give the desired action first in the first 3 months to get the HbA1c. So whether the patient's HbA1c was 11, we'll use a different combination. If it's 9, we use different, or if it's 8.1, we use different. So of course, as you said correctly, if patient is already on 15 milligram, we will look at other different factors that the patient is having and not increase just one dose fully. So it's always the additive dose of different drugs which will help us to achieve the omnious octet from all the angles. That is how we would look at it.
Nicely said, it depends on individual patient's pathophysiology and his response to existing drugs. Suppose somebody is on 15 milligram pioglitazone, he has gained 4 kg weight, I will definitely not increase the dose. Dr. Ajay,
Absolutely.
at this point, I would like to clarify on the issue of pharmacogenomics. You want to say something, Dr. Murthy?
Yeah, I'm just trying to elaborate on the point you made. The teaching in yesteryears was that at 50% of the maximum advised dose, you get about 80% of action. So increasing the dose beyond that makes doesn't give you any much benefit. Rather, you could add on another agent working at another point.
Correct. Perfectly all right. Perfectly right. So, Dr. Ajay Kumar, you mentioned the word pharmacogenomics. Actually, being a molecular endocrinologist, pharmacogenomics is my area of interest. And you see, most of the inter-individual variation in response to a drug is related to drug metabolism rather than drug target. Actually, this great study, even if they will do pharmacogenomic analysis, I know like other literature, which is lot many studies on literature, they will lead nowhere because they use optimum or suboptimum dose was not based on pharmacogenomic data. So I don't think there will be anything very meaningful come out of pharmacogenomic data analysis from this great study. So what Dr. Murthy says right. Optimum dose, suboptimum dose, to be very frank, we will be able to know only when we are using either drug metabolite levels or using genomic data to determine which is the right dose or not correct dose. So very complex subject, and I think we can't say much on this. So second question to Dr. Sheikh is coming to the disease biology. You know, you came with the concept of disease modifying drugs. I think you came with this concept, DMD concept. So, DMD point of view, can we individualize the therapy for a patient, even optimum or suboptimum dose of a drug and their combinations towards some specific goal? Can I give an example? Somebody is already his suppose body weight is around BMI is 22. He is on metformin. HbA1c is 9.7. So he is from a family which had diabetic nephropathy, and there is a strong CAD history. How you will treat that sort of patient? With you increase the dose of metformin and that add some medicine, or you will come with a combination, because there are expected multiple complications because of the genetic background. So what's your opinion on that point? Should we go for two drug combination, or escalate one, then add another third one like this?
Okay. Another very interesting clinical question, sir. I think let's recapitulate. You said 22 years boy with genetic history of diabetes and nephropathy, and
Nephropathy and
HbA1c is
CAD.
around 9.
9.3,
HbA1c is
9.2, 9.2, 9.2.
9.2. Patient
He
is already on metformin.
Yes.
And
Now,
so
this
we do not
question
have
is
the
open
BMI,
for
or
the
we do not
discussion
have.
to all the speakers. Yeah, Sheikh, you go ahead.
So this is one case exactly which talks about how do you modify the disease knowing that this patient is a genetic predisposition and has got a high genetic effect which can lead this patient for nephropathy. In fact, there are patients and families which come, doctor, my grandmother had this, now my father has this. How do I help myself about this? So here is that term how they have given in the ADA, talking about the modify the disease outcome, and exactly as I said in the first case, also in the example, that it is the target HbA1c and the target organ damage that we need to prevent. So definitely one of the two drugs should be started. One, first basic reason, because the HbA1c is uncontrolled, and two, because of the family history of the nephropathy. So we would definitely be using a drug here first, maybe an SGLT2 inhibitor, and looking at BMI and looking at patient's profile, looking at patient's dietary habits. Also here this patient should be on another drug, which here could be an GLP-1 RA. We do not know. We have not seen the patient yet. We still not need to know what is the urine ACR, what is the retinopathy, is there another family history of CA pancreas or something else. So it is going to be a full chart, full data from the patient, and then we would. But to start with, an SGLT2 for this particular patient would definitely be yes, after patient education thoroughly about how you can prevent infections and how you can prevent genital mycotic infections and so on. So modifying of disease, yes.
Yeah, so for disease modification, now I'm asking the same question to Dr. Ajay Kumar and Dr. Murthy and Dr. Jayakumar, all three of you. In such patient, I add pioglitazone and SGLT2 inhibitors simultaneously. That is my practice. What is your opinion about it? Because patient major concern is long-term complications, and HbA1c is still 9.2, and there is no risk of severe hypoglycemia with this combination. What is your opinion, Dr. Murthy, for this patient?
As far as I'm concerned, I don't
Yeah.
think you have a better insulin sensitizer than pioglitazone, without any doubt. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, because of rosiglitazone, rosiglitazone is also a good molecule. Pioglitazone has gone out of favor, except probably
Yeah.
in certain situations like women in postmenopausal age who got a risk of fracture, or there is a basic of cardiovascular disease, fluid accumulation or so. I think I totally agree with you. Pioglitazone is still an excellent drug. I don't think you have a better insulin sensitizer than pioglitazone, and diabetes is a problem of insulin resistance, no doubt about it. And with HCL2 inhibitor, it makes an excellent combination because the fluid part of it, weight gain, is also taken care of by
Yeah.
HCL2 inhibitor. And as far as insulin sensitivity, No doubt about pioglitazone. I don't think we have ever had a drug which can match that.
Yeah. Dr. Ajay, what is your opinion on this point? I'm asking Dr. Ajay Kumar. Sir, you're senior, so I always tell you, sir. You're not audible, sir. He's not audible.
Am I not audible? Am I
No,
not
now
audible?
audible. Now audible. Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to say that whenever we use pioglitazone, I am sure everybody does this, that we have to be a little vigilant. Any patient who is, getting exponentially weight or is developing edema and so on and so forth, even we very clearly look for even the covert left ventricular dysfunction, even if there is no manifest symptom. So long as we take care of this, I agree with Dr. Murthy that in my practice, pioglitazone is one of the commonest used molecules. And I will reiterate what he said, that when we address the issue of insulin resistance, metformin will only address 35% of the insulin resistance. Almost 65 to 70% of the insulin resistance actually is in muscles and adipose tissue, not in liver. And that is precisely addressed by pioglitazone. Metformin will only address the issue of insulin resistance at the level of liver. And therefore, in majority of the patients, pioglitazole will turn out to be a very good agent in combination with other recommended drugs, so long as we keep a very close visual on our patient to keep an eye on those possible side effects which has to be taken into account.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jayakumar, you want to say anything on this point?
Yes, sir, I agree with that completely because pioglitazone has got all the bad name for the wrong reasons, I think. So,
Yeah.
but as Dr. Ajay Kumar had told, we should be more vigilant in terms of its usage. It's not a molecule like a DP4 inhibitor where you can just use it left and right. In this patient which you are talking about, the third drug, if it's not getting controlled, will be a combination of GLP-1 agonist. So that would
Yeah.
cover all the aspects and would be better in terms of the drug interaction also.
So, next question to Dr. Ajay Kumar. Sir, if I ask you in few lines, can you summarize the results of GRADE study? In 2-3 lines. What is
Yeah.
the carry home from GRADE study, sir?
So very clear, patients of type 2 diabetes who have failed on monotherapy of metformin, if you wish to add next drug, the most ideal would be a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Data is very robust. It will give you long-term control, very effective control. That is followed by insulin glargine. That is followed by glimepiride, and that is followed by DPP4 inhibitor. That is, the sequence of efficacy and robustness in terms of the duration of efficacy. That's the first part. What I clearly didn't mention because of the interest of the time was the side effect profile. Almost all 4 drugs are very well tolerated. As expected, liraglutide will lead to some amount of GI side effects in the beginning, which settles out after 3 to 4 weeks' time. And glimepiride actually showed slight excess in terms of hypoglycemia. What came out as a big surprise was that insulin glargine did not show an increased risk of hypoglycemia as compared with any of the other 3 arms. And that is very
Yes.
encouraging that when we use basal insulin, we are not running a very high risk of inducing a lot of hypoglycemia to our patients. And therefore, this is a very robust outcome from the GRADE study. Now, the point that you mentioned about the pharmacogenomics and the data which is going to be analyzed out of the GRADE study is that it's not only the pharmacogenomics, they are looking at so many data. They are looking at the markers of insulin resistance, they are looking at the markers of beta cell function, they are looking at the markers of genetic possibilities, and all these combined together will definitely show a light that if at all there is a long duration of control with liraglutide, is it because of the beta cell protective effect? If there is cardiovascular benefit, is it because of some molecular control of the GLP-1 receptors that we are talking about? So in the long run, and particularly with the modern times and the use of artificial intelligence, this gold mine of data is going to give us a lot of information in future. And therefore, we should be eagerly looking forward to the analysis coming out of all this discussion.
So now a very pertinent question. Can we translate those results in our thin fat phenotype? Because we are genetically
Yeah.
different. The genetic difference is not great, but the most important difference is your Indian pathobiology is poor adipogenesis and more central fat deposition because of thin limbs. Because I'm working in genomics of Indian fat distribution, I know it is the poor fat deposition in lymph which lead to excess deposition in the abdomen. this type of patient, this phenotype is entirely different from the phenotype which is more obesity related problems. Do you think we need our own efforts to answer this question, or we can translate as such?
I couldn't agree more. You have hit the nail. I think when it comes
Yes.
to using insulin, I would be very reluctant to use only a basal insulin in the majority of my patients of type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
Because as you very
Yeah.
rightly said, the Asian phenotype is completely different. The amount of
Yeah.
carb content that we have in our food, the amount of PPG at the time of insulin initiation, we have very robust data that majority
Yeah.
of the patient will need a combination insulin, but certainly a combination insulin which is safe, convenient, does not increase the risk of hypoglycemia, and yet gives you the same efficacy. Similarly, in terms of the oral drugs also, we know that for some reason the Asian phenotype respond very well to DPP-4 inhibitor, whereas the
Yes.
Caucasian
Yeah.
phenotype, they do not respond to DPP-4 inhibitor to that extent. We have data from India, very good data by Dr. Mohan and many other researchers who have clearly shown an A1C reduction of more than 2% with sitagliptin and metformin combination. So yes, you are absolutely correct that it would be much better that now with all the frontline 5 or 6 drugs, we have some study like GRADE, which is conducted in India on significant number of patients, which gives us the statistical power to address this particular question. Thank you.
Sir, actually, I would like to add pioglitazone in this type of study. Very important drug for our population.
Absolutely.
So, what's your
Absolutely.
opinion,
Why
Dr.
not?
Murthy? Yeah. Yes, Dr. Murthy. Yeah.
Just to, I totally agree with the comments made. Just to add on, another problem is the insulin inertia starting. So very many times when we are attempting to start insulin, we are already too late to, just stop with the basal, and we may require a combination because we don't, start basal insulin at the right time, and because of insulin inertia, very many times we are so late that basal insulin alone doesn't work, and we may require a combination.
So, a question for Dr. Jayaprakash. Do you think kits available in India deserve point of care HbA1c estimation? What is the practical application of point of care HbA1c in our context?
Yeah, I think in our context, as far as the diagnosis is concerned, I don't think we are ready for that. For monitoring, probably yes. The specific problem as far as the kits which are available for us is concerned is one is the temperature stability. The extremes of temperature that happens in most parts of the country and the humidity, I don't think the HbA1c kits, the best kit as far as the studies show is the Roche kit. It is still not validated in terms of the humidity and the extreme temperature conditions. So probably for monitoring the disease, yes, because in case of doubt, you can always correlate. But for the diagnosis of diabetes, again, I don't think we are not yet ready for that as far as point of care testing is concerned. We would still need a lab validated. We know the problem with labs also. Many of the labs still give false HbA1c results. So as far as the point of care kits are concerned, in India, we are not yet ready for diagnosis.
Yeah. Thank you. So, to sum up some of this question answer session before going back to Dr. Murthy, I believe these trials which were conducted in Western Caucasian population, we can't translate their findings into our scenario. And what we need is to do a good study from India. Actually, instead of talking and describing Western's results, we should generate our own data. In fact, I am submitting a proposal. I was asked by Ministry of Economic Affairs, Government of India, not by Health Ministry, to come with a robust proposal. In fact, I have crafted it and given to, with my government, it will go to Economic Department because they are mainly concerned about the cost of the care. So Ministry of Finance is taking interest in this subject rather than Health Ministry. And second point is that pharmacogenomics, actually, sir, I look into literature. Whatever is the standard design of trials, you start with metformin, not on target, add another medicine, the third medicine. This type of design will never work for pharmacogenomic study. there should be a design which start one drug, monitor drug metabolites, see clinical effects, have some cutoff or escalation of dose, and then adjust the dose. Once you have taken into account pharmacodynamics, kinetics, only then pharmacodynamics should come into play. So with this message, over to Dr. Murthy for comments.
Sir, again, thank you all for again another such an interactive, wonderful session. I think we have spent about 3 hours without even realizing, that, we are tired or exhausted. 3 hours has just gone by. And these interactive sessions without PowerPoint presentation, how useful it is and how much of information we get, I could appreciate in this 3 hours. So all of you have done a wonderful job, excellent thing. And I will just make the closing remarks. Please, all of you stay. That I would very much like to thank Corona, Dr. Vijay Charlu and his team for getting all of us together for such a high level scientific session. I know the amount of hard work he and his team, so also Dr. Chandrasekhar, has been put to, get together such a program, deciphering 5 days of ADA, and then getting it to about 56 or 58 topics which have got some relevance to our Indian population, then bringing it down to 18. And last Sunday also there was an excellent session conducted by Professor Ashok Kumar Das, following up with this. Congratulations to Vijay Charlu and all of you. And we would like, on behalf of all my colleagues, we'd like to profusely thank you. And please to continue to bring such high-level scientific symposia for our learning. Please continue to do this. And thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful experience. It's been a learning experience for me. It was so wonderful being with all of you. And I really, it's not always physical, but even a virtual meeting, if it can be done like this, it's as good as a physical meeting. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Vijay Charlu, once more, and your team, all your colleagues who did, and Dr. Chandrasekhar again for such a flawless and seamless, 3 hours of program. It just went off so well. Thank you so much.